Are your groups not as tight as you'd like? Maybe you're doing everything you think is right, but still seeing shots land inconsistently. I've been there, and I know how frustrating it can be. The good news? You don't need expensive gear or a professional coach to see dramatic improvements. In fact, fixing the most common issues can be easier and cheaper than you think. Today, I'll be walking you through 5 practical tips to help you shoot smaller, more consistent groups. These are straightforward, actionable changes that you can start making right away. Some won't cost you a single penny, while others might involve minor tweaks to your setup or routine. Now, stick with me until the end, because I'm also including a bonus tip that has made the biggest difference in my shooting journey. It's something most people overlook, but I promise it will elevate your game. So whether you're just starting out or have been shooting for years, these tips will help tighten your groups and improve your accuracy. Let's dive in and start making every shot count. Choose the right aiming point. One of the most common mistakes I see, and one I used to make myself, is aiming directly at the point where your shots are landing. At first glance, it seems logical, right? If you aim at the same spot your bullets are hitting, you can track your group. But here's the problem. As your shots land, they start to obliterate your aiming point. Once that clean, defined spot is gone, it becomes much harder to maintain precision, and your groups will inevitably open up. To fix this, I always aim slightly away from where my shots are impacting. A simple trick I use is to dial my scope up by about 6 clicks so that my aim point shifts just above the group. This keeps the target intact and allows me to shoot with much greater consistency. Another factor that's often overlooked is the size of your aiming point. If you're using a larger dot, like 1 inch, you're introducing more room for error because your crosshairs can drift within that larger area. Instead, I recommend using a smaller aiming point, like a 1/2 inch dot, to force yourself to focus more precisely. It's a small change, but it can make a big difference. Here's a tip for load development. Create a distinct aim point for every group you're testing. One method I use is to fire a single shot at a clean target to create a bullet hole. Then use that as my aim point for the remaining rounds. This ensures I'm always aiming at a precise and consistent spot. These small adjustments, choosing the right size aiming point and keeping it intact, are simple but powerful ways to tighten your groups and improve your overall accuracy. Use a level for consistency. Now let's talk about a tool that many shooters overlook: a level. Some people think levels are only useful for long-range shooting, but that's not true. Even at shorter distances, a tilted rifle can cause your shots to drift, making it nearly impossible to shoot those tight groups we're all aiming for. Here's why this happens. When your rifle isn't level, the trajectory of the bullet shifts slightly to one side. At 100 yards, this might seem negligible, but as you stretch out to 200, 300, or beyond, that error compounds. Even worse, the effect is inconsistent. It changes with every tiny tilt. This randomness makes it incredibly difficult to diagnose why your groups aren't tight. To eliminate this variable, I always use a bubble level or a digital level attached to my rifle. Brian Litz, a renowned ballistics expert, has done extensive research on this, and he found that the human eye can only resolve angles within about 3 degrees. That's decent, but a level, whether it's a basic bubble or a high-tech digital system, can do much better. The type of level you use doesn't really matter. Some attach to the scope base, others screw onto your scope, and even standalone levels work well. What matters most is that your reticle and the level are aligned. To confirm this, I run a tall target test. I shoot at a vertical line at different points on the reticle to make sure everything stays aligned. Once I verify my setup, I can trust that my rifle is level every time I shoot. If you're not using a level yet, it's an easy and relatively inexpensive way to improve your shooting consistency. It might seem like a small detail, but as we all know, precision shooting is all about the details. A level removes one more variable, letting you focus on what really matters, putting rounds where you want them. Master your parallax adjustment. Parallax is one of those things that can sneak up on you if you're not paying attention. I'll admit, early in my shooting journey, I didn't fully understand how much of a difference it made. Once I learned to adjust it properly, my groups immediately became tighter and more consistent. So what is parallax, and why does it matter? In simple terms, parallax occurs when the reticle in your scope appears to move across the target as you shift your head slightly. If you don't address this, that subtle movement introduces variability into your shots, no matter how consistent the rest of your setup is. Here's how I check and adjust my parallax. I start by aiming my scope at a fixed target. Without touching the rifle, I move my head side to side or up and down. If the reticle appears to shift against the target, that's a sign the parallax is off. To fix it, I adjust the parallax knob on my scope. If the reticle moves in the same direction as my head, I turn the knob one way. If it moves in the opposite direction, I turn it the other way. When the reticle stays completely still, I know I've got it dialed in. This adjustment is especially critical if you're shooting at varying distances. Every time you change your range, you need to revisit your parallax settings. And while having a consistent cheek weld helps, it's no substitute for proper parallax alignment. By taking the time to master your parallax adjustment, you'll remove another variable from the equation. It's a small step, but it makes a big difference when you're chasing those tiny groups. Rethink the lead sled. Let's talk about lead sleds. These tools can be a lifesaver in certain situations, but they're not ideal for precision shooting. I know this might be a controversial take, but hear me out. Lead sleds are great for absorbing recoil, especially if you're sighting in a hard-kicking rifle. They provide a stable platform and can help you stay steady if you're working with heavy calibers. But when it comes to shooting the smallest groups possible, they have limitations. The main issue is that lead sleds don't always return to the exact same position after each shot. Even slight shifts can introduce inconsistencies into your groups. On top of that, using a lead sled doesn't train you to handle recoil or maintain proper form, which are crucial for real-world shooting scenarios. What I've found works better is a combination of a solid front rest and a rear bag. This setup provides stability while still allowing you to control the rifle. It also mimics the natural shooting positions you'll use in the field, so the skills you develop will translate better to other scenarios. If you're currently using a lead sled, I'd recommend trying out this alternative setup. It might take a bit of getting used to, but once you see the difference in your group sizes, you'll be glad you made the switch. Check your mounting hardware. The final tip is one that's often overlooked, but can save you a ton of frustration. Make sure all your mounting hardware is secure and properly torqued. I can't tell you how many times I've seen shooters chase their tails, trying to figure out why their groups are inconsistent, only to discover that something was loose. Here's the problem. If your scope, rail, or action screws aren't tightened to the right specifications, they can shift during shooting. Sometimes this happens gradually, so you don't notice it right away. Other times, it's an issue straight from the factory. Screws might be too loose or coated in oil, making them more likely to back out. The fix is simple but effective. Invest in a quality torque wrench, like a fat wrench, and follow the manufacturer's torque specs for your rifle and scope. For added security, I like to use a little blue Loctite on screws that aren't meant to be adjusted frequently. This step is quick, easy, and inexpensive, but it can have a huge impact on your shooting consistency. Don't overlook it. You might spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars on your setup, so why risk throwing it off with something as simple as loose hardware? By ensuring everything is properly mounted, you're building a solid foundation for accuracy. Trust me, it's worth the effort. Dry fire practice. I promised you a bonus tip, and here it is: dry fire practice. Now I know what you might be thinking. Dry firing doesn't sound exciting. It's not as thrilling as sending rounds downrange, and it doesn't give you instant feedback like punching holes in paper. But let me tell you, this simple practice is one of the most effective ways to tighten your groups. Here's why it works. Dry firing allows you to focus entirely on your trigger control and sight alignment without the added variables of recoil or live ammunition. When you dry fire, you can see every little movement in your reticle as the trigger breaks. If the reticle shifts, that's a sign you're pulling or jerking the trigger. With regular practice, you'll learn to break the trigger smoothly without disturbing your aim. Some shooters worry that dry firing might damage their firearms. While this is rare with most modern rifles, you can always use snap caps if it gives you peace of mind. These inexpensive dummy rounds protect your firing pin and let you practice as much as you want. I like to dedicate about 10 to 15 minutes a day to dry firing. I set up a target on my wall, usually just a small dot or a bullseye, and focus on keeping my reticle perfectly still as I break the trigger. Over time, this practice has made a huge difference in my shooting. My groups are consistently smaller, and my overall confidence behind the rifle has skyrocketed. The best part? Dry firing costs nothing but your time. It's one of those techniques that most people overlook, but if you stick with it, I promise you'll see results. Give it a try. You might be surprised at how much it improves your shooting. So there you have it. 5 tips to instantly shoot smaller groups, plus a bonus tip that can transform your shooting game. Let's do a quick recap. 1. Choose the right aiming point to keep your focus sharp and precise. 2. Use a level to eliminate inconsistencies and build a solid foundation for accuracy. 3. Master your parallax adjustment to prevent reticle drift and unlock your rifle's full potential. 4. Rethink the lead sled. Consider switching to a front rest and rear bag for better consistency. 5. Check your mounting hardware to ensure your setup is rock solid and reliable. And don't forget the bonus tip: dry fire practice. It's a simple, cost-effective way to improve your trigger control and make those groups tighter than ever. Now I want to hear from you. Which of these tips are you most excited to try? Have you already been using some of them? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? Drop a comment below and share your experiences. I'd love to know how these strategies are working for you. If you're ready to take your shooting skills even further, check out my next video where I cover the top mistakes beginners make in long-range shooting. I'll walk you through how to avoid them and set yourself up for success at extended distances. The link is right here, so don't miss it. Until next time, stay safe and keep those groups small. I'll see you in the next one.